Greetings and welcome to the Headhunter with me, Laban Clive, coming to you from Kofisi, Africa. As always, we appreciate your feedback on our social media platforms. Grateful for all our keen followers. Please continue giving us your feedback as we continue to improve the show as well and ensure that you get hunted and be part of the Headhunters list. As always, we'll speak to professionals who are in these spaces and actually headhunt. And honored and glad today to introduce to you none other than Madam Winnie Pertet, who is the CEO and founder of Serene Consulting. Take a look at her rich profile right ahead. Quite a rich profile, I must say. Well, you don't get them anywhere else other than the Headhunter. Winnie, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for creating time to be with us on the Headhunter.
Thank you very much, Laban, for having me. And it is an honor for me to share this platform with you and to talk about my leadership journey.
Appreciate it. So let's go straight into it. I'm going to mention quick companies, of course, Coca-Cola, there's KCB, there's now into entrepreneurship. Just give us a bit about your background and how you really transitioned and cut out your niche in this space.
Wow, it goes back to the beginning. I was a high school teacher. My first degree was in education. And I taught English and literature and English for 4 years. But I was not very contented with that space. So I moved into banking. My first bank that I worked for as a management trainee was Postbank. I was there for a couple of years. And then it was during that time that I felt that the people space was really something I wanted to work in, or an area I wanted to work in. During that time, I went back into college to do management. And one of the units that I really liked was personnel management. That's what it was called then. And then after a while, I moved to another smaller bank. And during that time, they had hired a consultant to come in and do restructuring. And she requested to get a support from the organization. And that time, I was a management trainee again. And so I volunteered to support her. And this was around restructuring. And out of that was to create a new organization structure. And part of it was also creating a personnel department. And out of her output, now the question again that was put forward was, who was interested in creating a personnel department? And I volunteered. So essentially that is how I got into the people space.
Wow, and it's been all the way up.
It's been all the way up from there.
Maybe not giving preferences, but of all these companies you've worked for, what was your favorite and why?
Favorite and why? Wow. Lots of them. Wherever I worked, there were learnings that I got out of it. I enjoyed, it would be the organizations where I created change, if I may call it that, or transformation. But I enjoyed working in KCB. It was massive transformation. I went in as a HR change manager, and that is where I really cut my teeth in as far as change is concerned, organization change is concerned. And it was great to see the transformation that was happening then. It was a lot of work, but quite interesting. From there, I moved to EABL, and again, what I enjoyed doing there was, one, the rebranding of EABL. And this was as far as people and practices is concerned. And then the next one, I think, where I really did enjoy myself was a merger. I went in as head of HR UAP, and then within a year now we merged with Faulu and Old Mutual. Again, a very challenging environment, but I did enjoy to see the power of three organizations coming together, and more specifically seeing the impact of that on people.
That's interesting. You've always been in the deep end,
Somehow.
at the right place in the deep end.
Somehow found myself
At the
in such
Headhunter,
places,
we
yeah.
managed to break news as well just a few weeks ago. One of our guests, I should say maybe in his previous role, that's Paul Russo, was appointed the CEO of KCB
Yes.
Group, a company that, of course, you've worked in, especially in HR. I just want to get your views as a HR professional and a guru, I must say. You've been there quite long as well.
Thank you.
The appointment of Paul Russo in KCB, and particularly coming back from the view that HR was always deemed to be the orphan box.
Yes.
What do you sense into this?
Two things. One is that a leader doesn't have to come from the other common places like it's always been done, because you find organizations will bring in a CEO from finance background, strategy or operations. It basically tells you at a CEO level the most crucial competence required is leadership. And it doesn't necessarily come from any of those other boxes. And therefore, Paul getting into this particular position with his background in HR it just confirms that a leader doesn't have to come from specific boxes. But the one thing which is great about it, the fact that he has a people background, therefore means he understands that it is people who drive the organization. And one of the things that CEOs will tell you is that part of their greatest challenge is talent. We have to find and how to retain talent. And the fact that Paul has this as his background, naturally, it means that one of his greatest challenges is taken care of, in my view.
Any more appointments that we're going to see from the HR circles to the corner office?
It would be great to see more of that happening. One of the things that you also find happening is that we have professionals moving from these other areas of functions into HR. And then you'll also find, and I was talking to somebody about this, and they said, I want to be a CEO, but I won't be complete unless I do HR. And as a result of that, they moved into the HR function. So that tells you that people being a very crucial function within the organization or being a crucial capital, then it is only fair that people get engaged in that. And I think we should be seeing more of that happening.
Wow. We actually, of course, would mention, of course, still continuing with the headhunter and guests we've conversed with, the appointment of Terry Ramadhani as the CEO of KEMSA, who was actually previously HR director at the Aga Khan Network. It's also interesting to see such strides, and I think showing that there's actually light at the end of the tunnel, especially looking at having that diversity, and especially in such senior positions. Winnie, let's shift gears now and just talk about the whole conversation about culture. You've largely spoken about your career, and you can actually tell that really your passion, your space is, going out to that organization and creating change, creating something that was not seen before. You bring a very interesting mix there, where there's culture and rebrand. So talk to us about culture and how organizations now transition into that whole rebrand to morph into this new organization of the future.
Okay, if we start with culture itself, it's basically, it's a key pillar within organizations that sometimes may be overlooked, or organizational leaders may not be aware of it. And it needs to be at the forefront of every leader in their thinking. Why? Because you may put in your strategies, you may put in your structures, but if your culture is not right, nothing moves. And it is, it kind of like comes up in the nuances and the thoughts and the feelings of the organization as a whole. And it's the pulse, really, that moves the organization. And therefore, the reason to be aware of it and to deliberately work on it. So when you realize that you have a typical culture and this is who you are, it's only right that then you start asking yourself, are we structured right for the future? Is the culture and the way we see it?
But Winnie, HR professionals are not marketing strategists, nor are they brand strategists, and vice versa. How did you manage to create that kind of interesting mix of, shall I say, expertise?
Okay, one, it's with practice, but also working with the marketing teams, because they understand what I've just talked about, the branding part of it. But from a people perspective, I understand the thinking and the mental construct about people within the organization. So a merge of the two then gives us a stronger brand, so to speak.
Thank you. And what's interesting to note is that, of course, you've done fantastic work at the Standard Group, rightfully so.
Thank you.
On the bit. And we can actually tell the side of when you're experiencing change. And most of it is more environmental, like, digital transformation, lots of impact on the business. And just trying to say, okay, well, this is a culture that we need to actually, audit to ensure that we actually get on to the future. What then is your advice to many other companies that, especially post-COVID, that are now trying to ask themselves, okay, wait a minute, where exactly are we? And especially knowing that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. The
absolutely.
saying goes. So what is your advice to them?
Post-COVID, and I'm glad you've asked that question, because with COVID, people went back in-house and wondering what's going to happen to us. And many organizations then did money. Okay, we'll do what we do, remote working, hybrid. We moved into hybrid, and now we're going back into full-time, but also hybrid environments. The one thing that has shifted is the culture of the organizations. The COVID years, one thing that has been greatly impacted is the culture of the organization. When we went into COVID, and let me say from a people perspective, we had policies and procedures before that guided employees in terms of what they did. The leaders in the organizations were used to a certain way of doing things, and the organization was used to a certain way of doing things. And then come COVID, we don't have answers. Fine, we'll create solutions as we go along, but we come out to this other side. So the one thing that you are is not who you were before you went into COVID. And whatever structures you had in place then, whatever culture organizations had in place then has definitely changed. So post-COVID, what has really shifted in terms of our practices? Where are we getting our talent from? And are they there? What do they want? One of the things that's very clear, maybe two things about it, is employees are looking for flexibility. We used to call it flexi time. It is now flexibility. They're asking to put themselves first. It's no longer work-life balance. It is life-work balance. How do I fit work into my space? And all these call actually for a good examination of the culture space. People want to work remotely and remain working remotely.
Yes.
So how, therefore, in such an environment, do you ensure that your people still believe in the organization, they mesh together and work as one? So there are huge challenges right there.
Wow. And it's those challenges that you seek to address at Syrian Consulting. Yes. And we'll speak a lot more about your business as well after the break. So as we take a short break, we'll be coming back with Winnie Pertet to just delve deeper. We're looking at that whole culture space, particularly in this post-COVID period. And what are the HR gurus learning? What is happening in these spaces? And then, of course, if you're an organization out there, you're an entrepreneur, you're a shareholder, you're an owner, employee, it's a good chance perhaps to even think about maybe rebranding. And how do you go about that? Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Headhunter with me, Laban, coming to you from KTN Africa. As always, we continue getting insights and leadership thoughts from gurus such as Winnie Pertet, who's with us. If you missed the first half of the program, don't you worry. She'll give you some of the insights and what she shared. But ideally, it's all about culture and how do you ensure that you can actually lead to your organizational rebrand and just ensuring that you can stay ahead. Winnie was speaking about two organizations that you really were at the core of helping them transition. And here we're talking about KCB Group and also the East African Breweries Limited, that's EABL. Okay. Most of us will remember the old logos versus the new logos. Of course, they are advertisers and people would say, oh, well, they've just changed. So it's a marketing conversation or that's just about it. But from your perspective, you say, even with that rebrand, there's a whole people strategy element embedded into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we see is the end result of it. So take us through that journey, into how such companies come into that level where they now say, you know what, we're even changing our colors or we're even changing our logos for that matter.
Okay. Change in organization is often driven by various factors. Some of it, for example, may be non-performance, and some of it could be through mergers and acquisitions. And some of it could also be that they're moving into, say, private sector, they're changing ownership. And therefore they look at, so we're changing ownership as an example. Who do we want to be seen as going into the future? And then behind that, there's the promises that you've made to your stakeholders as leadership. And therefore, as you go out to your stakeholders, there is a picture that you want to see out there. In order to deliver this picture, there's your people behind that. They're the ones who are going to deliver on the results and the promises that you have made. It also comes from thinking about the purpose of the organization and saying, this is who we are as our purpose and the reason why we exist as an organization. And therefore, you go, you work behind the scenes to understand where you are and where you're going into in terms of the business, our business strategies, the purpose of us being there, the kind of profits that we want to make, or that is for profit, organizations or for non-profit organizations. And people are always a key pillar to the delivery of that. And so you look at your people and say, how are we structured from a people capital perspective? And will this help us to get there? So in the work that I was involved in, say, with KCB, they were coming from being a government-led bank, and there was more private sector influence getting into it, and that was the future. And so their old lion, as you call it, was just a symbol of the government influence then. And they were moving to this private sector thinking. So then it was only natural then they asked themselves, what kind of people do we have, and are they going to help us to get there? And how do we appear, therefore, to our stakeholders? Because you need to do a 360 kind of review, asking your stakeholders externally as well as internally, how you're structured to deliver for the future. And then you build your symbols there. So there was work that was done in the people space, there was work that was done in the operations space, and also in terms of the structures. And I therefore went in as a HR change manager to work on the people space. And between marketing, operations, and therefore the people, or HR in charge of that, we came up with this program. And my role was therefore to build the program, understand the concept of where the bank was heading into, and create programs that will help us to immerse the people. And I led that. So we had typical programs on asking people, looking at the KCB we have now, will it take us the KCB we want to have? And what are the gaps? And then using that, we would address the gap there to get us there.
Do you have a time period of maybe say, okay, well, we rebranded at this time, we did a culture audit at this time, and then this brand will take us X number of years. Do you have that? Or you just, advise clients to just have it that, always change? Can you do it yearly? Can you do it 5 years, 10 years?
Okay. Let me start by saying this, that the impact of culture on any organization takes about 4 years.
4 years.
That's when you can say, this organization feels like this. This is who they are. So it is a journey.
Yeah.
But it's always, to your point, it's always important to go back and ask yourself, are we still structured right? Do our customers still see us as who we expect to see? Again, with a change of strategy, with a change of your business thinking, always ask yourself, how are we structured? Is our culture right? And so when you talk about organization design, again, another favorite topic of mine, is that whenever you talk about your organization strategy, and then you go into asking yourself, are we structured right? Culture always sits at the base of that. And therefore, you always need to talk about culture. Think about all these other areas or all these other pillars, but culture always sits at the base of that. And therefore, they need to ask yourself consistently, are we structured right in all of those areas?
Wow. And if not, again, you might have people that perhaps are not aligning to the culture.
Yes.
Now, how do you take that, what's called the hard decision to
Around
let
that.
go staff who are aligned, and those who are aligned, ensuring that you can actually empower them?
The issue of creating that alignment is always with the CEO and the board. They're the ones who have to fully understand that they are leading this, the culture. Yeah, culture is leader-led at the board and at the CEO level specifically. And therefore, they need to ask themselves, are our people buying into our culture? And the hardest thing is to, when you're changing your culture, is to deal with people who are completely not aligned to your thinking. And the hard conversations therefore begin. And that is where you will see that when business strategies change, there may be situations where people are let go, or people ask, can I go? Because they're not aligned to exactly what is going on. And this is something that we've seen happen over time. Yeah, where like I said, because a business decision that we're doing business differently, that in itself has people impact in terms of them working for you or not working for you. And conversations must happen.
Great.
Yeah.
So, and that's really great, client-based, I must say, in terms of the work that's done. If you would have Syrian Consulting kind of write a thought leadership series based off on what you're learning, speaking to organizations, the multinationals, speaking to the SMEs as well, the mid-sized companies, what are some of the insights that you're getting in these organizations, particularly in the bit about that whole culture rebrand space?
One is awareness, because you find there are many organizations that some may not be aware about our culture.
Yeah.
So knowing about it is one, and then understanding it is two. But for them to understand is a crucial part of their business, and you cannot ignore it.
Okay. And what would be your advice? So we look at the problem, and then what will be your advice into it?
Get someone to work with you to understand what it is and to understand who you are. Because I may know Winnie, but when we put it collectively, we may not know who we are. And remember, I talked about the purpose of the organization. So when you understand the purpose of your organization and why you are there, it is only natural that you ask yourself, then if we know who we are and why we exist, are we living to that? Do we have the right behaviors that will help us, therefore, to deliver on our purpose? It cuts across, your operations. It's not a people thing only. It cuts across your operations. Then seek to address that. And the other thing is be patient. It won't happen overnight. It will not happen overnight.
That's not a word that is quite common in senior management, especially for results. I think everyone is thirsty for results, thirsty for an output, thirsty for ensuring that the company succeeds.
True. But the one thing is that, remember, it is people who are going to deliver this for you. And people are not switch on and off kind of capital. Today you have money, you can transfer your money. Today you have your technology, you can change your technology. We can't do the same with people. Because each and every person or each and every individual in the organization is a whole being with a whole personality. And therefore, if you're going to achieve a common personality or organizational personality, then you've got to work within the personalities of the individuals. And that's the reason why it's not an overnight thing. Wow. It's not a tick box exercise, let me call it that. Yeah. You've got to invest and be patient.
So that culture will hold for another 4 years.
Yes.
But the process of, doing the work behind the scenes, how long will that take? Based off on your experience on an average perspective, going in there, doing the audit, and then helping organizations stay ahead?
It depends on the size of the organization. There's an organization that we've not just done a culture audit for them. So we were building another practice, people practice on it. But out of that, we've seen, it became kind of like a mini culture audit. And this taken us about up to 6 months. Organizations that we worked with, like the Standard Group, it took us about 5 months to work, because you co-create this with the organization. True. As a consultant, you can sit behind the scenes and you do your work within a month or less. But then it is the whole ensuring that you're doing the right thing that takes a bit of time.
Wow.
Yes, it can take up to 4 months, thereabout.
Yeah. Winnie, I'm afraid we're running short of time, but the whole perspective, I think, with the headhunter is to also ensure that even for the leaders as well who are watching, they can actually kind of be aware, because you mentioned awareness is actually a critical need, especially in these spaces. And also just sharing your insights, such as you said, that, taking action. So it's one thing to know, but again, ensuring that you can actually take action. Just before I let you go, it's just more on your personal insights. And this is largely from, the background you've had, very strong, especially neck deep when organizations are transitioning or are morphing. And I feel like we're going back into that space again, post-COVID. What are some of the skills or advice you'll actually give to professionals who are now in the spaces that you played in, in that whole transitionary phase, for that matter?
This particular period calls for maybe 3 things. One, agility. You don't have a choice. I mean, the things have really changed, but so professionals need to keep up with that. and just ensure that in the ever-changing environment that they're able to adapt to that change. Because then if they don't, they get frustrated. They frustrate the people they lead as well. So they need to be agile in their thinking and in their doing. The other thing is to be innovative. Because when you didn't have something, you need to create it, you need to innovate it. But as you're doing that, involve people. The solutions are with the employees. So what do they want in an environment? And the third thing for leaders is empathy. That everybody's come up from a difficult environment. Leaders need to have the empathy. And to put the human back into the human capital, because that is very, very critical. And COVID just taught us that we're human beings, basically, at the end of the day. But how we go forward, therefore, we need to keep remembering that. Yeah.
Winnie Pertet, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Always
you
a
so much
pleasure
for
to have you aboard.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, you don't get these guests anywhere else other than the Headhunter. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you on board. My name is Laban Cliff, coming to you from Coffee Africa. As always, we thank them for their beautiful spaces that they continue to offer the Headhunter show. Till the same time next week, it's goodbye.